Hello and welcome to the Writers and Books Visiting Authors series. I'm Kathy Zevna, the Communications Associate here. For those of you who are new to us, Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, a bookstore, and literary programming for people of all ages and backgrounds. You can find more information at our website, wab.org. Writers and Books would like to call attention to the complex and troubled history of the lands on which we live and work. We are hosting this event from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Onondaga, or the people of the Great Hill. In English, they are known as the Seneca people, or the keeper of the Western Door. We're so happy to have Adebe DeRango-Adem with us tonight. She'll be joined in conversation by Michael Fraser. First, we'll hear Adebe read, followed by a discussion and Q&A. Michael Fraser has published 3 books of poems, most recently The Daybreakers, a fictional retelling of Black soldiers' experiences during the American Civil War. A Toronto-based poet, he is the recipient of numerous awards, including the 2016 CBC Poetry Prize, Free Fall Magazine's 2014 and 2015 poetry contests. His work appears in Best Canadian Poetry in English 2013 and 2018. In and through literary experiences with word and sound, utterance and song, Vox Humana considers the different ways a body can assert, recount, and proclaim. Adebe DeRango-Adem is a writer and former attendee of the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics, where she mentored with poets Anne Waldman and Amiri Baraka. She is the author of 4 full-length poetry books, most recently Vox Humana, recipient of the 2023 Raymond Souster Award. Her poem, Vox Genus, Provectus, was selected by Sonia Sanchez as the winner of the 2021 Boston Review Annual Poetry Contest. Welcome, Adebe.
All right. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I hope that the volume and everything is okay for everyone. Thanks to the Writers and Books team and related bookstore family. I did notice the very fancy and wonderful marketing and publicity that did go into this event. So I thank you for that. And also to Poet at Large and my dear friend Michael Fraser for agreeing to do this when I know you're busy writing your own books. So thanks for everyone tuning in. I wanted to just start by saying, I'm sort of sorry for the smoky skies we had last week due to the wildfires. It struck me that we're, living in this kind of a new normal. And I think a lot of us are finding it hard to accept. A couple poems actually from Vox Humana do touch on this. And I'll be reading 6 poems tonight in total. So Vox Humana is a book that takes a deep breath in order to ask the difficult questions. It's a collection of poems that demand a hearing and demand to be heard. Vox opens the reader to the alchemy that happens between respiration and phonation, when air becomes breath, becomes speech, becomes song bridging past, present, and future. I'll start with the poem Vox Refugium. By all historical logic, my phenotype should have disappeared, should not have been by now. Yet here I was, is, am, and before poetry, I wanted to be a spy. Perhaps they are the same, wanting to melt into the psychology of things. 30 years ago today, Basquiat died, and here I am watching white nationalists gather in the Capitol. It is enough to make anyone want to put down brush, pen, self, pick up gun, bomb, drink. Best case, I drown out the voice that says to disappear. If I am still here, I must be a spy. my only trace the sand steps of a shell. It appears my second sight has served me well. Part 2. Truth be a told thing. Wherever I am beached is where I belong. My only map, a parameter of scars like Crusoe's numbered days. An algebraic attempt to live and relay how in meeting the other we are opened to the foreign self. The hovering birthright we've built by perfecting the sound of the sea-bound tongue to make from the shipwrecks of chance an unbroken wave. But it knows how voice goes, how it came created, cannot be destroyed. Dear time, strange chariot of beauty, lead us into our wounds with thanksgiving. Be never still, my itinerant heart. So in the beginning, the idea behind Vox was to write a book about pipe organs and pipe organ music, which was sort of something that meant a lot to me through some life events. And it started that way, became attuned to different things. I began, really invested in researching vocals and like vocal tracts and things like resonance and register and reverberation and and other sort of meta communication type things. And by what I mean by that is, how we can convey our emotions non-verbally, but through, meaning or emotion through pitch and loudness and volume and intonation. And I am interested in, paralinguistic properties too, which is a long and fancy word for, things like grunts and groans and even throat clearing, and gasping. These are sounds that have a lot of meaning, and they mean other than through language. So the book was supposed to be about those things. And, then the events, of 2020. And I realized that I couldn't really stay in the realm of linguistics and semantics anymore. And so I decided to see through, and ask those difficult questions. And so, Vox kind of meets the reader in time, in the present, where so many voices are being suppressed in real time and across, hemispheres. So yeah, you could say that Vox, I guess, kind of began as a book, interested in sound and music and space. And then it became attuned, I guess, to the sort of, it needed to collective, to amplify certain collective issues that were happening around me that I couldn't stay quiet on any longer. The next poem I'll read is Vox Sentio Fidelitas. Dear reader, I know you know your A, B, C, D, E, F, Gs, but do you know your ADCs, your after-death communications, spontaneous encounters with the deceased? A is for burning Amazon, as in B is for Brazil, not Bezos, whose bank account be on fire as we C for click, click, add to cart. But C stands for climate change. See, I see no changes. See only chokehold, shaft, history, a crystal, blood diamond. D is for dendrology, for did you know a monoculture forest has species of tree where if one is destroyed, the others close by close themselves up, curl their leaves to commune injury, limn the alarm. But a person is not a tree. If you hack us, we do not return. We lumber day in, day out. D is for distress signal. Sometimes racism so thick I can't see the forest for the trees. E is for example. If one person of color dies, don't we all lose oxygen? This is not a poem, but a smoke signal. Can't see my way over the slate of the sky, the river, and through the wood on my way to grandma's house by the Humber, where I'd pined for a boy named Neil Johnson for 7 years, till we were 12, hoping he'd pick me for the dance. And he did, and finally kissed me in the arboreal lagoon with a lizard tongue. Neil, you hear? Neil, can you hear? I know you love me. Even the years I danced alone, Vicky said she ran into you on Queen Street West, along the stretch not taken over by hip capitalists, and you were homeless now. Do you remember how popular you were? I remember. You trying to suck a Du Maurier from a straw and speak a thick French accent through your perfect teeth, but you choked on the smoke. This poem, smoke. Coughing and laughing until you got it, trying till you got it right. Not all of us get it right the first time. I get it. That shelters are not always a place to exhale. That exhaling is a difficult art in a surveilled space. No room to dance like we did to usher, 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 usher. Making the other girls jelly. Did you keep your celebrity smile? How did you manage to make it through the night after night after night after night after night? And what is love? Is it a guarantee we won't fissure? Listen, if you see me, I hope you cuss me in patois like you used to, and I will look for you. Please don't sneer if I can't find you and can't speak. Just come with jazz hands, flailing with money and money. Don't judge me if it's not enough to make you feel rich like you made me. But if I find you, best believe in what my hands can do. Enough talk. I'll weave our palms together so you never leave. Will you have this dance? I hear your laugh like yesterday. And to be heard is to be truly loved. And to be loved is to have each layer of you are willing to unfold, be listened to. Poems a calling, but poems too a call to unfold and uncover the bodies we left behind. For each time a Black body falls and I'm not there to hear it, I feel it. The way the capital R romantic feels them, intimations of immortality. Every death, I hear a throwback, for every death throws me back to the brute, vernal equinox, brute, vernacular at the root of this dub. This is a throwback. I hear you. I hear all the vowels, a tide lifting, a heralding in my throat, and I know I'm loved. You are loved. All right. I can never quite decide if that's a happy poem or not, but there we are. The next piece I have is Vox Nebula Fabular. We imagined ourselves to be Tennessee Williams's Ladies of the Fog, speeding down Highway 30 past the cemeteries and trailer parks, wondering how people just go about living, how men go about forgetting. My vertebrae soften each time I am asked to consider the maladies of others and all the sad people I tried and tried to love, but now all we need is a spark, a match to light the way, back to that elliptical range of dreams. I am telling you, a thing can heal without causing pain. If it hurts, try again. And before you know it, the notes will begin mounting from your mouth and you will be mouthing words of worship in a tongue outside your tongue. Part 2. In an even earlier life, you may have been a semi-precious stone, Columbina, mulatta, Ptolemaic bone, old church bell, or bellhop songstress in a moonlit room. Or were you the song, the trespassing tune, wailing into midnights and heaven's largesse, or something equally vexing and hurling with wishes, beautiful and black and holy, holy. So, keeping the faith, I guess, is hard these days. These are trying times for a lot of us. And so I wanted to, take a moment to honor that, tonight. And all poetry events always really just blow my mind, because really, we're coming together to celebrate poetry, even as Rome, or really the world out there, burns, right? And I didn't want to turn this into, I wrote down in my notes, do not turn this into a TED Talk, a small TED Talk about climate change. But, I've been thinking deeply about it. And I think that having a bit of sort of climate anxiety is actually a good thing, as we kind of, interrogate the metrics of being and doing well in a world facing what it is. And, well, here's the TED Talk part. I think we need to figure out how to treat the earth better, because it's kind of already too late. And I think that the effects that we're seeing now, we thought that we would see them in the future, in future generations. But, so anyway, as I look ahead to the future, I find myself continuously haunted by the question of, how can I write in a time like this? And thankfully, though, I find myself equally haunted, by the question of how I can't, how can I not write in a time like this? This next poem is a sort of a love song to Cleveland, Ohio, and a shout out to 12 Literary Arts, where I did a residency in 2019, and where I workshopped the first poems in this book. And, and I think we'll get to this in one of the questions, but sometimes if you can't find the words, you turn to music. This one is called Vox Consone Navitas. Hear me out, dear bread of life pantry on Carnegie Ave. Dear botanical gardens, thing of curatorial beauty, I can try and tune out the loud swirling of trees, green as money, that beautify the broken streets, try and drown out the sound of the vacant row homes, empty abodes of dead millionaires with songs on the radio. But when that song comes on about the rains in Africa, I begin dreaming of Aksum, Nubia, how we reigned in reality. I am facing Lake Erie and the marina, where two Black men in thick camouflage coats fish and talk about God. In reality, they are likely conversing in murmurs, grunts, and veteran speak. And by this time, it is raining ever so slightly on Euclid, and I pass two more elderly men with soft branches for a body, and in an abstract maternal gesture, as if to say sorry for the war that conscripted you so as to script your life into a theater of pain. Or is it the pain we share, I see, in which I am your understudy, a production in which you are known for your famous last lines? Or do we need to switch up that storyline, including the one that philanthropy wasn't the result of giving Black people hell? And still, we gave you our children who became your mistresses, even gave you our musics, let you mimic our medicinal blues. What say you, Amiri? I can hear you, Sonia. Hear you, Hughes? Is it because we made you that you don't want us? Because you need us like sight needs darkness to make sense of light? Thanks so much. And I have more poems for everyone. And, you know, I will say that I hope to one day live in a world, you know, that doesn't profit off of, you know, the lifeblood and just blood of Black and Indigenous people, and that we see some real reparations, you know, in our time. But until then, you know, I guess I will say that if you do feel, I mean, this is a book about voice, right? So if you do feel a certain type of way, you know, about what's happening in the world, to voice it, you know, to share your aspect of the story. And if you, any story you have to tell, you know, is a valuable story. And publication and performance and protest are also ways that we kind of do this work, and ways that we kind of can use our platforms meaningfully, you know, to do certain imaginative work, I think, you know, creating new solutions. Anyway, I told you this was going to be a TED Talk. I knew it. But anyhow, my second last poem for today. Yeah, we'll do that one. Vox knocks. This poem is after self-care. Real talk. How to care for a self evading. If it is possible, I can care while I evade myself. Or is it that I am too much to care for even one life? When I write, I care myself for a world. Though I evade, am I getting this right? All I know is when I'm depressed, I dirt devil the house top to bottom, brush up my syntax, pop vitamin D. But who in this house, or any, figured out how to become hallowed? I am too much. I evade. When I am depressed, I dirt, top to bottom. But who in this house, hallowed? How long can you go evading the broken paraphernalia? How long can you be in the hold of parts before they begin dispersing, evading into the lines you were meaning to say? The word is what I do. To be in the hold of words is hard, but I will take it. Over the soft eterna, thinking it's enough, it's been enough, just having. Words is hard, but I will take it. Over the soft thinking it's enough, it's been enough, just having, thinking, it's been enough, just having a dream. I just want to say, as we come to the last poem of the evening and the upcoming short Q&A with Michael Fraser, I want to say thank you for listening, whether it's the live or the YouTube. Thank you for gracing this book with your eyes, ears, spirits, and for supporting poetry, and the wonderful people like writers in books, who are involved in writing and editing and publishing and marketing and selling books in this world, you are my people. Yeah, I'll end off with, I always have a couple of alternatives if I feel in the moment that maybe I want to read something entirely different. But yeah, I'll end off today with Vox Pulmonis Percussio. Lord, you are loved, but lo, do you behold the non and anon voices fathoms below? Can you fathom, Father, that we care about space more than people? Lord, forgive me if I look up at sky, but do not see you. Just see climate change and ask compulsively to send me a man who knows why the canary sings in the mine, or a daughter immaculate like you did your mama. Okay, fine. So I see you, sometimes in coral skies, reminding us of the dying like snowfall in April. I hear you in Jimmy, Joni, their electric psalms, transfiguring, configuring in me a brief suspension from my disbelief, a suspension in time, a moment of solace for not being killed. Save us, O merciful Lord, my Father watches CNN. Our country is in genocide, a word I never thought I'd use in a poem. Why, O Lord? When we gifted you our medieval churches cut from a single rock, and the Ark, Atlantic, Father in heaven, my father's mother country is being destroyed. Lord, you remember Lucy. We just need to know what you can and cannot fix. Do you know how easily lungs can percuss, how rage can age and italicize a body? Tell me you know we arise from the same ancient score, the air, Afro-heavy with dandelions getting ready to give up their ghosts. Tell us, is that where you are? Thank you so much. And that concludes the reading portion of the evening. And if anytime, Michael, you want to jump in, I'm happy to.
Well, I am here and
yes.
I am mesmerized again. Thanks. That is wonderful, stunning. Your book is a dynamic read, and I love that it can't be pigeonholed or really tied to genre, even though its home is poetry. It traverses and inhabits all areas of expression. I'm certain every time I read it, I'll unearth new epiphanies, as I do with the vast majority of my favorite poetry books. So again, thanks again for such a wonderful collection. Congrats on winning the prize. I was longlisted in it at one point.
I was like, Michael, I was feeling that you would win, to be honest. But hey,
no.
It's so funny. I know. I was honored, with even the long list. So for me, it was kind of a shock and awe moment. But
I had a feeling you were going to, someone just told me, and I'm happy, especially I've read it about 3 times now. And I was like, man, this is serious poetry. The stuff you're doing in this book is wondrous. I mean, you can read poems in different ways. If you read it on down the left side, and it makes sense, you can actually read the poem down the left side or the right side. The ones, I mean, yes. It's a million times far more difficult than any of the other books that were put forth. I can honestly say that. Before I get into any of the questions, though, I would like to just let people know, and this might embarrass you a bit. I hope it doesn't embarrass you. I think it's wonderful. Our paths first crossed and intersected back in 2005, actually. and we had both won our respective sections of the Toronto Star Poem About Toronto contest. And there it is, although I think it might be a little
Love it.
blurry. Yeah, I still have this paper from August 27th, 2005. I believe you were in high school, if I'm not, or you were definitely under 18.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
17. Yeah.
yeah. So it was obviously heralding, I'm sure the air was crackling when something great steps into space. And wow, I just think all these years later, look how much I mean, this is incredible. And we still have it. So this is where our paths first converged. And I do feel a spiritual connection with you because of this and all the other things that have transpired in the intervening years. Now, after seeing all that, I do have some questions. Um, First, I must say that Vox emphasizes voice, obviously, vibration and sound. And to use one of the quotes, we find the poet, quote unquote, fighting for auricular coherence from one of the poems, quote, spinning my tale to the decibels of my own joy. For me, Vox Humana reminds me that we are utterly and consistently creating every time we voice thought, every time we utter sound, and even the most banal syllable. And it's an incantation and the magical essence of creation. And I say this, having grown up in the Judeo-Christian tradition and being Catholic when I was younger, going to Catholic school, we have to remember God creates by saying, let there be light. And it's the voice that sets and propels everything, obviously including the universe, into motion. And that's the ultimate power of the voice. And I think you capture that, that tremendous thunder and power in the voice, even in the most quiet lines. Now, here's the question. It's two parts, actually. The irony, I guess, is this poetry meant to be read aloud? And how does a poetry voice play out in the written word?
Yeah. I thank you for that incredibly generous sort of metaphorizing of, what I'm trying to do with voice and trying to sort of access that profoundness of the voice in space by, I'm not sure if my work is of biblical proportions in its, in its purpose, but, definitely, I guess, and we've talked a lot about this before, but, it's sort of impossible for me to write or to write for the stage or the page or what have you, and not be attuned to music and musicality. And so that's the one part of it. And where does that come from? Well, for me anyway, personally, it's, the product of, storytelling traditions, African storytelling traditions. And if we mine that further, there's the spoken word, which is kind of where it all began for me. And so the combination of, the orality, the sort of storytelling as a kind of handed down art form, really, through to my engagement with writers like you and people like Lillian Allen, and through to, because I've known you for more than half my life, but also I was just thinking about the numbers involved, right? But I see you and I see people like Lillian Allen, and I see people like Amiri, and I see people like Sonia as poets who are like in continuous sort of in chorus with me. That makes sense. And even the folks at Naropa, anyhow, so I take influence from all these things, and also from Black writers who do center jazz and blues and that kind of thing, as kind of, at the heart of it, a kind of a score, for imagining a better life. So, you know, and one thing I always kind of, when people ask me about like, tell me more about the musicality, you know, I think it's worth saying that music or that rhythm is not something I ever consciously add. Like I think it's bigger than that. I feel like it's sort of like, I'm just following the way that I've always heard stories, and I'm and I'm kind of like rerouting myself. I like the sound of that. Rerouting myself in that particular aesthetic attached to that particular, you know, cultural history of people of African descent, Black diaspora, and what it means for us to live in harmony, if that's possible. And I think that what we have seen is that we're not living in a harmonious time, but we can create our own moments of that harmony together.
We always have done.
Which we always have done,
Yeah.
You know? And so again, like to write in this free jazz style, when I think about when I won that poem contest with you, you know, I was really into jazz poetry, and I felt like it had opened up my whole world. But it's only really through Naropa and like certain things in my later life that I realized, you know, I can't write in a jazz style without paying my respects to the dialects and the rhythms and the intonations and the languages and the poetic diction, even of Black vernacular sounds and music. So to answer the question, yeah, like these are definitely poems that I think need to be read aloud. Although I will say that, like you mentioned as well, I do stuff with the space of the page in ways that I think is dynamic and can only be appreciated if you have a copy, right? And so yeah, and part of that again is, and I thank you for also saying that, you know, Vox is not really a book that fits comfortably in one genre or another in terms of content and form. And I think I have a couple quotes here that I wrote down by other poets that I always kind of keep in mind. And one of them is, you asked about poetry of voice. And Layli Long Soldier says in her book, Whereas, it's the rise and fall of the voice we must capture to mean a thing in writing. It's kind of like what you were saying about, and you know, like that biblical proportion scene, right? Of the
You're not gonna let me forget that.
I mean, it's gonna be a hard one to forget. You know, and thinking about, like, you have this language, right? And but to capture its sort of essence, it has to be sort of propelled out there. And so in Vox, like, kind of, I'm trying my hardest to kind of hold in the actual form of the text that energy of orature, of like the poet, so the multiple voices at work. So the voice of the poet, the voices of the sort of artistic influence, like I said, like, you know, in my midst, the voices that I hear, they're telling me, don't write that, or, you know, or that's tight, you know, the voices of, anyway, the performance, even, like, I'm thinking about all those aspects of voice that I'm trying to hold somehow on the page. And the second quote that I kind of noted because I want to remember is poet philosopher Edouard Glissant, who writes, "We know ourselves as part and as crowd. In an unknown that does not terrify, we cry our cry of poetry." And I thought, you know, Layli, you know, that quote about the rise and fall of the voices is how we capture meaning. And the we in Edouard's kind of imagining, you know, that we know ourselves in an unknown, that we can know ourselves in this unknown and yet cry out, you know, we're not terrified, you know. The we, I feel, is kind of capturing that, like, the sort of tenor of collectivity. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like Vox is saying, okay, who are the communities, I'm talking to, who are the voices I'm trying to amplify. And so I try to tell readers, or audience members or my friends, that when I really wanted, if anything, if you can take away from this book, is voice not as individual subjectivity, but as a kind of sounding out of the needs of our communities.
There's that choral element again, which you mentioned previously with Lillian and Amiri.
Yeah.
And you're part of that course.
I I feel that. And I feel that what we're doing, maybe I shouldn't have even brought in the jazz and the blues, because I really feel that what we're doing is something profound. And even the physics of sound, I know this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but even the physics of sound.
This is so multifaceted. We're now the physics of sound. Excellent. Excellent. Let's go there. Let's go there.
But the physics of sound of like sound is like a waveform that you can't stop, you can't trace, you can't easily translate. That can change depending on where you stand. And so that's enough physics, right? But
well, it's all vibration.
Exactly. Thank you. And
everything in the universe vibrates.
Everything actually functions through that kind of level of sound, on a very invisible level. And similarly, I think, the writer kind of exists in this political landscape, and this very chaotic one right now, but, understanding that, okay, like with the resources that I got, this is the voice that I got. And this is how I guess I can show my care in the world. Or, I don't know if that's kind of, hopefully it answers the question, but it's
that's not a thorough poetry, answer.
It's
your
a hard
answer's
one.
Not been thorough, Debbie.
Yes, but
you need to be more thorough with these answers. Okay, I would just like to, because we looked at the vocal aspect of Vox Humana, but of course it's a fantastic visual presence on the page. Those of you who've read it can be read in a multifaceted. It's just, you can read up and down. The poems are that complex and that dynamic and that interesting. So they make use of space, sometimes sprawling across the page to affect the rhythms. Okay. And why did you choose to use this non-traditional style? And how did you go about constructing each page?
I've answered this kind of question in different forms, but I think, and again, further to your point about kind of thinking outside the constructs of, what is the style of this book, or what is this book about? I just knew that I wanted to, okay, so, if I can't think of writing without sound, then I also can't look at a page without thinking what's happening off that page, if that makes sense. And so I'm constantly attuned to this imaginary audience. And so like my use of space and kind of slashes instead of line breaks, for me, it all works in service to convey the natural breaks in our speech, in our thoughts, the pauses that we make and take in our breath, the silences in between that actually make what we say understandable, audible, and all of this happening in the body as well. And taking that, and with my interest in sort of the sonic space and afterlife, I guess, of poetry, is like, okay, how can I take this my tradition of spoken word, and how do I represent that, sort of anticipate that in written form? How can I turn a word into a verbal kind of artifact? So I give the example, I'll give one example of like talking in asides. I try to sort of replicate that process of what does it mean to kind of, talk back on the side in ways that would make our ancestors like bell hooks quite proud, right? What is it like to, to speak in a hushed way or to talk to yourself? And how do you represent that, talking to yourself? So where some people have said, this is a very non-traditional use of space, I always like to argue and say, actually, I feel it's very traditional, because it's patterning itself after our natural way of breathing, of the way in which, like you said, vibration, how breath becomes vibration, becomes utterance or word. And again, the space in between thought and what we actually say.
I love that, the space in between thought.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Like how do you, and which is so key really to kind of, so much of what we do. And so what is that alchemy, right? Like what happens between respiration and phonation? And how can I translate that into text? So that was the main project with Vox. And with that too, just keeping in mind that, I've always felt that any division between, book poetry and spoken word poetry is a very artificial and kind of superficial, binary division boundary that I think is not, I don't see it as different. I don't know. This is probably another question, but
it's very evident it's very evident in Vox Humana that, you definitely have a very fluid notion of these things.
Yeah, and like you said, part of the fun part too, there are fun parts in this book, which is, spatially, some of the poems you could read from left to right, you could read just on the left, you could read just on the right. It's kind of like a bit of like a choose your own adventure.
I thought of that actually.
You know what I'm saying?
As I was reading, yes. I used to love those books when I was a kid.
I still love them. And, and the reading of Vox is, I think, so what I'm trying to say is whether you're reading it at home, it comes alive in a very different way because you are the one also helping produce the meaning of the poem.
Yes.
You're choosing which way it goes. And then, I get to have my own little choose my own adventure on stage or like tonight where I might choose to read the poem on the left. I might have chosen to read it on the right. Today, for example, I might have chosen to go a little bit, back and forth. And I leave room for those, yet to be known kind of conjurations and readings and iterations. So yeah.
And the reader is constantly creating as you're reading this. And that's why it's going to be different the next time you read it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And it's like a conversation. This, what we're having right now, we could do 10 interviews, but they'll all be different because the tenor of our communication is different. Anyway, yeah.
Speaking of which,
yeah,
I received the heads up that we probably just have time for one more question.
Okay.
And there are three I'm dying to ask you. So for example, I'm dying to ask about the Latin titles. I'm also dying to ask about its relationship to the silencing effects of racism. And one thing I noticed also when I was reading, it's sectioned into three parts, which are called fugues. The first two fugues, I believe the first one is inspire with the definition, and the next one's conspire. But then the third one, you divert from that. It differs, and you basically ask the question, something is transpiring. And then I believe it's a call and answer. I could be wrong, but that was my interpretation and my production, actually. And then you have the answer, becoming known, right? So I was very curious about that. So in terms of the creation again, I'll allow you to choose which one of those three you'd like to, I guess, briefly address before we have to say goodbye to this time.
Yeah.
Moment.
Well, I think there is a note in the book about the kind of history of my relationship to the pipe organ and sort of
Of
that's
course.
where it kind of all began in terms of the title of the book. So, there's a very specific musical analogy that I use. And if you're playing the pipe organ, there's one reed, or what's called a short resonator stop. When you pull that stop is called Vox Humana, right? And so when you pull that stop, all the keys are supposed to create this sort of sound of the choral, like a choir of human voices. And I just thought it was so fascinating. I mean, and of course the book evolved to many other things, but so I wanted to write a book, so the fugue, for example, is something in sort of classical music terrain that I think if one is so inclined to purchase this book, I think that the note that I provide
Purchase the book.
really gives a really good sense of, like the fugues and the sort of classical music overshadowing everything. But overall, I wanted this book to write against normative ways of reading. I wanted to think about the line outside of the page. I wanted to honor storytellers. I wanted to honor our musicians and even visual artists, but I'm also just, and this is more of a fun fact, but I'm like a total word nerd. Like I study Latin for fun. Like maybe nerd isn't even the right word because it's too forgiving. Like, like maybe, like other people have hobbies that are actually fun.
Well, I think it's fun studying Latin too. What they say about me.
Well,
we do write poetry, and I must say that is very outside the norm in society for the most part. Although I think everyone writes a love poem at some point in their adolescence, for example.
And so for me, it's like I love etymology. I want to share that love with my readers and my listeners. I believe if I've learned anything from higher education, it's that we absorb words, but we also question words. We question their root. We question what they mean and how they mean. We question English as a colonial language. I question every process by which, a word becomes agreed upon, in terms of its meaning. And so that by using this kind of foreign Latin, I hope to defamiliarize us a little bit, to sort of jostle us outside of our comfort zone, to pull language apart and to refuse, really above all, the singular reading. Yeah, I think that's really what it's about, refusing the singular reading and seeing that as a reader, you are an active participant, in the meaning making of the text. So I hope that covers enough of your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to chat more, but I always love chatting with you, Michael. And I hope that our audience members who will watch this will consider, taking a look at Vox.
Yes, there's nothing like it. And it's been a real honor to just see you over the years progress. And because you were 17.
Can't believe that.
Right now,
I know you for like longer than some of my really close friends. Like, it's amazing. I feel very connected to you, and I'm honored, to have you in my life.
Yeah,
for sure.
Same here. It was great seeing you at the Griffins last week as well. However briefly. Yes, yeah. But thank you again for the book. Thanks to writers and books for this. Yes,
thank you.
To everybody who's listening, you definitely have to get a copy of this. You will not regret it. It'll be one of the best and most dynamic and interesting books of poetry. I don't even want to say book of poetry, because again, it surpasses any type of labeling. It really does.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Adebe, for the reading tonight. And thank you, Michael, so much for the rich conversation. Thank you to all of the viewers, whether it was live or on YouTube. For those of you who are interested in the book, I've linked it in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube, the link will be in the description. Thank you again, Adebe and Michael, and
Thank
we
you.
wish you all the best with the book.
Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much. Thanks for having us. Take care.
Have a great
Ciao.
night, everyone.